text messages show how a team of prosecutors got sucked into a conspiracy theory. It could cost them their law licenses.
This case is unprecedented in Colorado and really anywhere.
The Colorado Republican Party calls on cities and towns in Colorado to refuse to help migrants and to round them up instead. Help for people struggling to make rent will be harder to get as the year goes on. And a move to protect a butterfly in Colorado highlights why invertebrates aren't protected like other animals. Because there's nothing wrong with being spineless, unless you're a politician or a news show. This is next. The ethical rot in a district attorney's office may go beyond the elected official and involve her entire team of prosecutors, seen in text messages discussing how to go after a judge based on a conspiracy theory, because he was ruling against them in a high-profile murder case. Here's Mark Salinger.
In March of 2022, nearly 2 years after Suzanne Morphew went missing, and almost a year after her husband was charged with her murder, this Change.org petition asked that the judge presiding over the case be removed. It alludes to unfounded conspiracy theories that former Judge Ramsey Lama abused his ex-wife. The same day it was posted online, District Attorney Linda Stanley sent a link in a group text with her team of prosecutors. "You guys might want to read this," she wrote. "But I'm not sure how true it is," she added. Lead prosecutor Mark Hurlbert chimes in, saying the judge must be biased. Attorney Bob Weiner says the team should make plans to secretly investigate the judge. "Holy crap, yes, let's go after him," Weiner wrote. "I can get an investigator on it," Stanley concluded.
It's so wrong.
Judge Ramsey Lama told us last year that he believes Stanley and her team of prosecutors secretly investigated him and his ex-wife based on the conspiracy theory because they didn't like his rulings in the Morphew case.
My ex-wife was followed. Strangers were appearing at her church, following her to a playground with our son.
The Change.org petition was started by this YouTuber. District Attorney Stanley even texted the group saying, "She has a YouTube channel. I'm not sure that's a credible source." Even after the sheriff's office declined to investigate former Judge Lama because there was no evidence, Stanley sent her own investigator to interview Lama's ex-wife, concluding herself that the conspiracy theory was indeed wrong. Which leads us to today.
Anything that they said to each other, all of that is going to be used against this group of attorneys.
All three prosecutors in the group text are now facing complaints filed by the Attorney Regulation Council to the Colorado Supreme Court. Ethics attorney David Beller has spent years defending clients in front of the same board.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of prosecutors deciding what their conclusion is going to be and then going out and looking for evidence to support the conclusion.
A conspiracy theory derailed a murder case. Now prosecutors could lose their law licenses.
This case is unprecedented in Colorado and really anywhere.
Charges against Barry Morphew were eventually dropped for reasons not directly related to the conspiracy theory. Former Judge Lama told me today that he was shocked to read the text messages plotting a secret investigation against him and his family. Remember, Kyle, that he was a sitting judge on this murder case at the time that this all happened.
And again, like, these prosecutors work in a rural area, but it includes some of the most high-profile names in Colorado law enforcement in the last 2 decades.
Exactly. So you have Linda Stanley, who's an elected district attorney, and then you have Mark Hurlbert, who used to be the district attorney up in the mountains. He prosecuted the Kobe Bryant case. These are not just small-town lawyers. These are elected officials with some serious, they've done this before.
We've seen the consequences more and more in recent years of what happens when people believe bonkers things they read on the internet. And the thirst that some people have to believe these untruths. It's one thing if it's your aunt or your uncle. It's a different thing if it's a prosecutor with power.
And rarely do we get to see kind of the tick-tock of how this all unwinded. And truly, it was somebody sent a link to a Change.org petition, and from there, an investigation was launched through just a couple of text messages.
As you said, an unprecedented case. You've been on it from the start. Mark, thank you. The Colorado Republican Party is pushing efforts for local governments in our state to preemptively declare that they won't welcome migrants and that they will, quote unquote, remove illegals themselves. The state party is circulating what the GOP calls law and order resolutions, and they say that there is growing momentum for these in at least 20 cities and towns across the state. The suggested language goes beyond saying that cities won't welcome migrants. It says that they will, quote, remove illegals from their communities and send them to sanctuary cities like Denver. Much of the wording's lifted from a resolution passed in Colorado Springs last week.
The city of Colorado Springs is not and will not become a sanctuary city. The City Council of Colorado Springs has observed the severe negative impacts on other American cities by their self-designation as sanctuary cities. City Council affirms remaining a non-sanctuary city and asserts it will not spend taxpayer dollars on services related to this crisis.
The Republican Party's email also uses some pretty obvious fear-mongering to try and scare officials in other cities, saying that Colorado Springs is dealing with an influx of quote-unquote illegals. City leaders there say there are actually 21 migrant families that came to the Springs, and all but 9 have since left. Conservative leaders in Monument and Aurora are considering these similar non-sanctuary resolutions. In the Springs, the city's legal team pointed out that that resolution had no legal impact on city services. Colorado's best-known anti-tax crusader and convicted tax cheat Douglas Bruce is now running for Congress. He told me today he's going to fund his Republican primary campaign himself and will not take donations. Bruce said his top priority is deporting quote-unquote illegals. The man behind Colorado's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or TABOR, later went to jail for tax fraud and money laundering. Bruce's campaign website says he'll focus on immigration, stopping genital mutilation, an apparent reference to gender-affirming care, and respecting Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Bruce is running in the GOP primary for the 5th Congressional District in Colorado Springs, the one being vacated by Republican Doug Lamborn. That is the same race where Republican Party Chair Dave Williams is using the party resources to promote his own candidacy for Congress and to attack his rivals. So today is Colorado's first deadline for people who need help paying their rent. There will be another chance in a few months. After that, it'll get harder. Our Angeline McCall explains.
With nearly 6,000 evictions filed in January alone across the state, rental assistance, advocates say, is needed now more than ever.
But evictions are really bad and they harm people, and we're seeing it at far too great a level throughout the state right now.
Zach Newman and his team at the Community Economic Defense Project will help distribute the state's $30 million in state rental assistance funds.
That money will do an incredible amount for the people who receive it, but really there's just enough money to cover 1 month of evictions in Colorado.
Newman says rental assistance is most available for those who have already received a court summons to start the eviction process and are in dire need of help.
The use of rental assistance right now is really targeted to folks who are imminently at risk of losing their homes.
The state will open up applications again monthly through April. Then applicants will be chosen by random selection.
At which point all funds are anticipated to be spent and under state law need to be spent. So the money has to all be out the door by June 30th.
After June 30th, it's still unclear how much rental assistance will be available, meaning people who need the help might not get it just based on timing.
What happens when this very limited pot of money is used up, but rent is still high, wages are still not keeping up, eviction filings are continuing to increase. We have yet to land on a long-term solution as a state regarding what we're going to do about evictions, about high rents, and until we solve the underlying issue of affordability, this is the conversation we're going to keep having.
The state projects this $30 million will help around 3,700 households by the end of the year. Kyle.
You know, Angeline, when I talk to nonprofits that are doing this work, they say people are coming to them in more and more desperate situations, kind of farther along in the process. How has that process changed over the years of getting this help if a family needs it?
Yeah, the programs have changed pretty dramatically over the years. So let's say 5 years ago, someone who was rent burdened, right, paying 70% of their income towards their rent, they could go and ask for rental assistance and they would most likely get it, or there would be a higher chance of that happening. Now what's happening is that if you are rent burdened, you may not necessarily be eligible or qualify, or you may not necessarily have priority with these programs. And so what's happening is that people are finally getting rental assistance, but not until the very end, until they have that summons. And so that timeline is really scrunched. And even when people can get the help, it just means that, you know, they may not be able to actually use it.
Angeline McCall, thank you. The state legislature is moving forward with a bill that would let landowners off the hook if a hiker, skier, or other people enjoying the outdoors gets injured on their property. State's been taking an intensive look at this issue for years, in particular because one man shut down access to some of Colorado's most popular hiking peaks last year. A bipartisan proposal would change Colorado's decades-old recreation use rules on liability. Critics say the current rules leave property owners too vulnerable to lawsuits. This bill would limit liability for landowners who post a warning sign that describes the dangerous conditions on their land. The bill also reiterates that people accessing the land have to abide by the rules, like following the designated trail, or they'll be trespassing. The bill has the support of John Reber. He's the guy who used his mineral rights to shut down trail access to a series of popular mountains: Democrat, Cameron, Lincoln, and Bras. This is a much narrower version of this bill that failed in the state legislature last year. It's already made it through the Senate, and it passed its first committee vote in the House today. An energy company in Colorado is trying its best to avoid going green.
A lot of times invertebrates are overlooked in a lot of different legislation.
It's not the butterfly's fault that it is completely spineless, so the feds are stepping in to protect it if Colorado can't or won't. Colorado's utility providers are required by law to go green and to cut emissions over the next decade. That's why you see Xcel retiring its coal plants and offering up incentives for customers to make the switch from gas to electric. But a natural gas provider here says if they're expected to have people make the same switch, they're basically paying to put themselves out of business. Atmos Energy delivers natural gas to 127,000 customers across the state, many in rural and mountain communities. State regulators are about to consider Atmos's clean heat plan this week. It outlines how they'll cut emissions and support the state mandates on electrification. But Atmos wants to offer incentives for customers who make the switch to more efficient gas appliances instead of going to electric, which again they say they don't offer. Environmental groups are arguing against that. They want state regulators to apply the same electrification rules to all the utilities. Warm day in the city. Kathy Sabins here with a look ahead.
That's right, Kyle. Almost 70 degrees in February. That is very unusual. We have southwesterly winds coming into the state ahead of a California storm that's producing record rainfall, the mudslide threat, the sandbagging. They're needing to do that from Santa Barbara down to San Bernardino County, while we're enjoying a day with sunshine and temperatures 20 degrees above average, 66 in Denver, 74 in Lamar. We do have a winter weather advisory for additional snow in the mountains. Denver will be looking at a bit of rain with this incoming storm from the west, and maybe that rain mixing with snow tomorrow night briefly. The snow is picking up in the northern and central mountains, not enough that it's really impacting travel on I-70, but 4 to 10 inches of snow possible around Steamboat Springs, in and around the Park Range, where avalanche danger will be increasing as well. Those north and west facing slopes will pick up some heavy snow, while lower elevations tomorrow, again, seeing a spring-like rain shower in February. The accumulation ramps up tonight into the midday time period for the northern and central mountains, but I think everybody's going to get in on the action up over 8,000 feet. Mid-50s now, dropping 10 degrees by 10 o'clock. Your extended forecast shows a warm day tomorrow, not as warm as today. 58 with a rain shower, a rain-snow mix Thursday, then clearing. We're done with that Friday, Saturday snow thing. Back to sunshine and 60s for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, but tracking a shift in the weather pattern for the middle of next week as we say goodbye to February.
It's a very big deal for an invertebrate to end up on an endangered species list at all, at any capacity.
A butterfly in Colorado gets rare protection, and it raises the question, should our state's conservation efforts be thinking smaller? And why unaffiliated voters have their pick of 4 primary ballots this year. Next. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley is going to be coming to Colorado as she keeps losing to Donald Trump while staying in the race to offer an alternative. Haley said today she'll be in through at least Super Tuesday, when more than a dozen states, including Colorado, will award their delegates. She will host rallies in 11 states next week, including a rally in Colorado next Tuesday. The Colorado Republican Party has already endorsed former President Donald Trump, did not even wait for Republicans in Colorado to vote. Also, despite the fact that Haley paid the state party $40,000 for the privilege of having her name on the ballot. Tonight's next question is about those ballots. Viewer named Cindy wanted to know if unaffiliated voters in Colorado can vote on different party primary ballots between the presidential primaries in March and the state primaries in June. Cindy, that's a good question. So unaffiliated voters, have to pick one or the other, or skip it altogether. You're going to get a Democrat and a Republican ballot. You can only submit one for your vote to count. But Secretary of State's office says if you vote one now in the presidential primary, nothing's stopping you from participating in the other party's primary come June. U.S. Fish and Wildlife recently designated the silver spot butterfly as threatened. It means new protections for that butterfly that's found mainly in southwestern Colorado. Protections that our state's own wildlife management agency, Parks and Wildlife, could not designate because invertebrates aren't considered wildlife under state law.
We have a couple thousand butterflies in here at any given time. About 85% of flowering plants rely on animal pollinators, which most of those are invertebrates, which include like our native butterflies, our native bees. So it's super critical to all ecosystem health to continue having these butterflies. So the species is the silver spot butterfly. The fact that this butterfly made itself on like the endangered species list for U.S. Fish and Wildlife is absolutely incredible. The designation of threatened, now they can start looking more critically about what factors influence their species decline the most. This is a federal designation which gives the species a little bit more protection. Currently, due to the verbiage under Colorado legislation, plants and invertebrates are not considered wildlife. It definitely sets a precedent. A lot of times invertebrates are overlooked. They're not like super cute and charismatic like deer are or wolves are. It's a very big deal for an invertebrate to end up on an endangered species list at all, at any capacity.
So the state legislature is looking at funding to study rare plants and invertebrates, but they wouldn't classify them as wildlife. Your feedback from Marissa's papers to my mouth to your ears next. Hitching a ride from John Deere. It's the most Colorado thing we saw today. It's Drive Your Tractor to School Day at Severance High School, part of FFA week up there. Next viewer named Amy snapped this photo and spotted a mini tractor there parked alongside all the big boys. If you see something that feels like Colorado to you, and this does to me, email it our way next at 9news.com. A thank you to everybody in this state who grows and raises our food and those who want to in the future. Well, apparently it's dictionary night in feedback, but let's get after it. Kim says, Kyle, the phrase is quote, end quote, not quote, unquote. Had this exact same debate, Kim, with the boss a couple months back. A number of dictionaries, including Merriam-Webster, list quote unquote as an informal but understandable version of quote, end quote. I like the more informal one. The boss likes the more formal one. I hear where you're coming from on that. Jim says, interesting use of language. When you described what Republicans are doing in Colorado Springs, you said fear-mongering. I thought you're supposed to be unbiased in your reporting. No, I'm supposed to be accurate, Jim. And Oxford says that fear-mongering is the act of deliberately arousing public fear or alarm about a particular issue. When the Colorado GOP says the Springs has seen an influx of illegals, and in actuality they saw 21 migrant families, of which only 9 are left in town, that's fear-mongering. Our goal here is to use accurate language, not sanitized language.